Welcome one and all. It's time for yet another red hot, spicy, tingling adventure into the Age of Sigmar tournament scene, with the tournament report from Maple Meltdown, which just happened at the TSN Arena in the centre of Nottingham, and the sons of BEHEMAT have been out again with all their tentacles and eyeballs. What can you expect to hear about in this video other than 5 red hot, sizzling, spicy, tender, succulent, moist, finger-licking good games of Age of Sigmar? You can also look forward to me complaining about various rules that I don't feel should be in the game, or rules that I feel should be vastly different if they're going to be in the game. That's usually how these videos go. So, let's have a look at my list before we even stop looking at this beautiful thumbnail, where you can see the backs of my miniatures that my opponents don't get to see very often, but you're going to get to see quite a lot of them because obviously all the pictures are going to be taken from my side of the table, and Mega-Gargants, typically, they want to look forwards and move forwards. It's kind of how they roll. So, it is, obviously, Sons of BEHEMAT. It is the Breaker tribe. So there is a Gatebreaker, and the Gatebreaker is the one you can see on the right of your screen there. I do have little signposts on their bases, so my opponent can tell which one's which. And the Gatebreaker, the Breaker tribe, gives me certain bonuses. For example, the Gatebreaker and the Mini-Gargants can all choose to be +1 to hit against a particular unit type, so because of things I'd struggled against at previous event, I decided to give them +1 to hit against heroes and wizards. Maybe the better one all round is to give them +1 to hit against units with command models. That seems like it's more universal, but the things I struggled against were big, difficult to kill hero type models at the last event, so I thought I'd give myself a little bonus against them. And my triumph is going to be inspired for this army, and spoiler alert, I am going to get my triumph a few times at 1970 points. And see, my leader, who is the Gatebreaker, is the general and has the command trait Rabble Rouser and the artifact of power Amberbone Totem, so that means that he can run and charge and has a +1 charge aura around him that other units can benefit from. There is also King Brod in there, who is the model on the left of this particular picture, with the little face on his back there. And he of course has his prayer, which can benefit everything in the army, which is nice. And there's also a Warstomper in there, not visible in this photo. And that one has the Arcane Tome. Then I've got 3 individual Man-Crusher Gargants, so running around on their own, probably just sitting on objectives and trying not to get killed with their measly, puny 12 wounds and a 5+ save. Pathetic. And my battalions, I've got Bosses of the Stomp, which contains 2 of my Mega-Gargants, so I can get the extra enhancement, and I've also got the Battle Regiment with the 3 minis and the 1 remaining Mega, so that I'm only 3 drops. So occasionally I might be able to choose who goes first, which would be a rare luxury. So, let's have a look at round number 1. So, I've actually committed the cardinal sin. I've forgotten to enlarge my arrow that you're going to struggle to see like that. So, let me just go into enlarge mode here. There we go. I can bring this up here. Change the mouse pointer size. There we go. Let's bump that all the way up to 8. Let's go crazy. Okay, there you go. You can definitely see that now. So game 1, the Nidus Paths, which is notable in that it's the only one where you can teleport from parts of the battlefield to another part of the battlefield just as part of the scenario. So you've got 4 objectives, and one of them is wholly outside your territory, which is important for some things. In fact, for my grand strategy, it's quite important because I need to hold all the objectives that are wholly outside my territory. So that's going to be just that one there. And you can go between Path A and Path A is like a teleport move, so you really want to have a unit back there stopping the enemy from doing that. And the other ones, obviously, you can't start on them because they're not in anyone's territory. But if you have a unit there as well, you can do the same thing just to prevent the enemy from being able to teleport diagonally like that. So, what am I up against in round 1? is the important question. And you'll see here that there's some very juicy, very spicy ogres over there, very meaty. And they are the Meat Fist subfaction. So their grand strategy is take what's theirs. So obviously they want more units in my territory than I have at the end. And they have, let's get to the close-ups, slight close-ups anyway. We've got Frostlord on Stonehorn. We have got, that is, let's see, that one's got the Arcane Tome and has the Flaming Weapon spell. There is a Butcher around here somewhere with a Cleaver and Molten Entrails spell. There is a Tyrant with a Splatter Cleaver and Leadership of the Alpha aspect of the champion. And I think those are amongst this lot somewhere around here, around the big pot. There are some Ogre Gluttons, which I believe would be these ones in the corner here. We've got some Iron Guts, which would be these ones here. Slightly harder hitting ones. I think there's 2 units of those actually, 2 lots of Iron Guts. And there is also a Stonehorn that is not a hero, which is obviously the other one of these. So 2 Stonehorns, and the annoying thing about Stonehorns is that they have the ability, as a monstrous action I believe it is, after they charge, to then leap over the model that they charged and attack something behind it, so it's difficult to screen against them. So you've got to be very careful with that. And however, one thing which I totally forgot I had access to during this game, which can help against that, is King Brod has an ability that prevents the enemy from using their monstrous actions, and it diminishes the more wounds he's taken. But if you get King Brod into monsters, then it can stop them doing their actions, which is pretty good. So potentially that would be a good model to match up against the Stonehorns. But I've forgotten that exists, so I haven't factored that into my deployment plan. So you can see I've got one mini-Gargant down here who's just going to sit there for the whole game unless someone actually comes over to try and trouble him. He just wants to stop the enemy from teleporting over there using the Nidus path. That's the most important thing. And really with my Mega-Gargants I just want to sit on an objective because all my models are worth a lot. I want to sit on the objective and not really move too much. I don't want much of a movement phase. So that's the idea. We've got Forsen in the chat there. Hello there. Hope you're admiring what's going on here. Now with this army, I'm not really expecting to win too many games. I don't feel like it's that strong of an army. And I think there are other armies out there that can deal a lot more damage, including to Gargants, and can absorb a lot more damage. If not directly, they can absorb it by being able to come back to life, or resurrecting in some way, or just bringing models back to units. Whereas obviously I've got no access to anything like that. The best I can do is a Heroic Recovery and King Brod's Prayer, which can occasionally heal D3 wounds to everybody, which isn't very significant, so not a lot of wounds coming back for me. And let's move on. So, in the first turn, by the way, let's see, this army has a command entourage in it, and a Galatian command. So, I have got the first turn, and I'm going to dance straight into the objectives, desecrate this bit of land, for an easy turn 1, not much fighting going on, and put the minis out in front to maybe do a little bit of a kind of a screeny sort of job there. Against monsters, one thing that I'll be looking to do at some point this event is when I get the opportunity, there's one of the new monstrous actions for Sons of BEHEMAT allows you to slam a monster and pick them up and put them down somewhere, like on the other side of your base. So if I end up in a situation where, for example, I've got one Gargant here and another one behind, I can then slam an enemy monster back here so the other one can fight it as well. So there's lots of neat tricks you can do against enemy monsters, and there are a couple against me here. But I've got a bit of a spread out because I want to head onto as many objectives as possible, really, and try and score big early on, because once I start losing models it becomes difficult to score points later on. Battle tactics very difficult for this army. There's only 4 in the General's Handbook that I can score theoretically ever. One of them relies on my general not being dead as well. So desecrate enemy lands is the most likely one for me to achieve. The others are a bit trickier at times. Even eye for an eye isn't that easy because I'm not expecting to lose models all the time, or lose units. So gaining momentum is another one that's not too difficult, but those are the three main ones that I'm looking to score. My book battle tactics are really terrible. It's usually, there's one where you can destroy a piece of faction terrain, but obviously that requires a 3+ roll, so far from automatic, and you can only choose it once, obviously. So you just got to hope you can roll 3 or more and blow up some faction terrain to get a battle tactic, whereas other factions have don't be in combat, there's your battle tactic, get out of a boat, there's your battle tactic, make a charge, there's your battle tactic. So other factions definitely have it easier to score. I have it quite easy to score in terms of main victory points, the primary points, getting onto objectives and whatnot, but battle tactics definitely not. So moving on, 5 points, standard opening. Now King Brod, he's got the most wounds, and I've sent him into a showdown here with the Iron Guts, which are the tough ogres that are quite powerful, and a couple of juicy heroes who both have the ability, I think it's part of the sub-faction, that they do more impact hits on the charge. So I've sent King Brod over there knowing that he's got the most wounds, so he's more likely to be able to absorb some of that punishment and spare my other Gargants. So I've put Finest Hour on him for this turn as well, because surely he's going to eat some charges. And he starts taking a bit of shooting or spell damage. And then all these guys are coming over, so I do redeploy, because I think, you know what, if I redeploy, maybe 1 or 2 of these units will actually fail their charge. That would be nice, wouldn't it? And also, if you look at how he's positioned here, there's quite a big wide gap for many ogres to fit round. And now I've put him through this gap, so less ogres are going to be able to fit into combat with him, which is what I want. So you can see that they all do make it in, but whether, had I stayed there, maybe this unit would have also been able to reach with 1 or 2 models, I'm not sure. But he's taken 18 wounds now, so far. And one of the Stonehorns is charged into this mini Gargant. King Brod taking more wounds, up to 22. All-out defense played on him, of course, in the combat phase. And I'm dishing out a few wounds back onto the unit there, rather than, I think there's 3 wounds done to the hero there as well. So Brod is hanging on there, he's got 9 wounds left and he's still alive, and my opponent is up to 4 points for the round. So King Brod is dead at this point, as you can see, but the Iron Guts are also dead. So this is on my turn, because you can see here I've got the next turn and the Warstompers come into the action. So the Warstomper has attacked this unit here, as I wind back to show you who was there. So I've killed all the Iron Guts now, but King Brod does go down as well. But I'm holding this objective, I'm holding more than the enemy, and I did gain momentum by destroying the unit, which I think was this one. And it was a very tight one actually, because I think I had to finish them off by dying and then falling onto them to take the last wound. So that was pretty close. But the Warstompers come in now to hold that area. The Gatebreaker is teaming up with this mini that didn't die. Actually, it was the other one that did die. Let me wind back. Yeah, it was that one. That one died, and then the other mini and the Gatebreaker, who's my general, steam into this Stonehorn, and they're going to try and murder it. Now, the mini Gargants, I don't usually think they dish out a particularly high amount of punishment, but against heroes and wizards, of course, they're getting +1 to hit because of the sub-faction. And also, one thing that makes them slightly interesting is if it's on my turn and I do the Beast Grapple monstrous action, making the monster I'm fighting and the monster that uses it fight last, that means that the mini actually gets a chance to strike first and not get killed before it strikes, which is quite a common occurrence for mini Gargants with only 12 wounds. And at that point, when it gets to the strike last phase, my Mega-Gargant can still go first. So it's a good way of getting more models to fight first, which is very handy because you don't want to get knocked down a bracket and lose some attacks. And pain is being dished out. Not a huge amount though, so it's still alive. And what's the situation? I've got rid of lots of the Ogre infantry. I've lost 1 Mega so far. So once you lose 1 Mega, it can spiral out of control. But I am scoring big in the first couple of rounds, as expected. It gets more difficult later on once I run out of tactics I can actually do. My opponent goes eye for an eye. And I put Finest Hour on the Warstomper because it's bound to be attacked. And this one is trying to kick the butt of my Gatebreaker, one that was already in combat there. So we've got some heroes, and in fact the other one, that one actually moves away to here rather than sticking around and fighting, and then this one charges into the Gatebreaker. And then back here, wait a minute, nope, got it the wrong way around. This one goes over here, I think. Is that right? Yeah, he bounces to the other side and then kills this Gargant. So yeah, he does the flyover, charges into this one. They do look very similar, don't they? So this one, which was here, charges in and then bounces over the top with the monstrous rampage. It kills that mini Gargant, and then this one is still fighting here. Up to 14 wounds now, but all-out defense, very handy. So, with Gargants, obviously using command points to give them all-out defense or all-out attack is way more beneficial than other units because they are, of course, about 500 points a model. So you're boosting up a unit more significantly than you would be if all your units were 200 points. On the other hand, enemy debuffs, it's the same thing applies. If you're debuffing a unit that's 200 points, that's way less of a deal than debuffing a quarter of my army in one go. So you've got all your eggs in one very large, tentacly and eyeball covered basket. So the Warstomper is dealing with heroes charging in, trying to do damage. And you'll see that I do kill off this beastie here. So one Stonehorn down. And the hero, actually, let me go back, see whether there were two heroes there. I think this one might have actually got killed then. Either that or it's hiding somewhere. So I think that one might be dead now. So I'm still in the lead, but my opponent is going to be able to go first in the third round and chooses gaining momentum. So I've lost the roll off there for priority, which could be important because, let's go back. If I get the priority now, what's going to happen? The Warstomper might be able to kill this guy without being killed, obviously, because I'll be able to go first. And I can put the Gatebreaker into this guy. I can do the Beast Grapple, so they both strike last, so I could then hit with the Warstomper first. And then if I kill that thing, I could then go with the Gatebreaker and attack this guy. So going first is a big deal for the Gargants, not just for the normal reasons, but also because of that one monstrous grapple action, which is very useful on your own turn, not so useful on the enemy turn. So, turn 3 for the Ogres. Could that be critical? It could well be, because of course Ogres and Gargants both do impact hits on the charge. So this guy actually does not want to stick around and fight, it seems. Running away onto an objective. And this hero, who's been joined by the Butcher, who was hanging out up there, they do manage to kill the Warstomper, sadly. So I'm down to one Gargant there and one over here. So you'll notice that those Ogres up there haven't moved all game, because they do not want me to teleport over there, and I'm staying here with this mini Gargant because I don't want them to teleport over here. Because our grand strategies require us to be on the other side of the table. So my grand strategy would be met if I hold this objective at the end, and my opponent wants to get more units in my territory, so would like to get the Ogres over here. So neither of us are abandoning it. We did both discuss at the end that we were pondering leaving the area as bait to try and bring the other player's unit down here, and just to draw them out so we could then start to make moves in that direction. So for example, if I moved this guy out here, they teleport down here, I could then move one of my Mega-Gargants onto this objective with no one to attack it. So that was the thinking, and my opponent was thinking something similar, but we don't end up doing it. We're just staying there, cancelling out each other's ability to teleport to prevent grand strategies from happening. And my opponent is now in the lead, but I've got another turn to play with, but not many models left to do it with. So I go eye for an eye, because I'm running out of battle tactics I can achieve. Ones in the book are so specific. Some of them are like if you kill an enemy hero with a thrown rock, which is extremely unlikely unless there's a hero down to 1 wound and you've got multiple sources of rocks to throw at them. So even then it's a bit dicey because the main source of rocks that I have in this list is the Mega-Gargants, and they only have 1 shot and it hits on a 4. So very unreliable. There's also one for kicking an objective into my territory, but I don't have the Kraken Eater, who's the only one that can do that. There is also one where the Warstomper, if he manages to successfully pick up an enemy model, which has to be of 1 or 2 wounds, so totally irrelevant in this game where there aren't any of those in existence. So they're not ideal battle tactics, so I do struggle to score them, and yeah, there's not really anything I can do in this turn other than score a point for holding an objective. So I do get the crack at the next turn though. So the reason I don't score a point for the battle tactic in this round is because I don't manage to kill the Stonehorn that was hiding down here with the Gatebreaker. So instead, in the next turn, I then have to cash in this one's mine, because this is my general, so I'm going to be able to score that and kill it. And the mini just has to stay there still. So I'm in full-on denying the enemy grand strategy at the moment. So I do score a few points in that round, but it's trailing off as you can see. My opponent is going to very easily desecrate this piece of land. It's a bit of a silly battle tactic really, because it's depending how much terrain there is of course and the precise positioning of it, but it's usually automatic in every game I play. Desecrate their lands for either side is automatic, unless you have a ridiculously vast army that can put dozens of models all the way across the table on every piece of terrain that could be desecrated, and they also have to be survivable enough to not die when a Mega-Gargant goes after them. So very unlikely, so it just seems like an auto-complete, that one. So I wouldn't mind that one disappearing, as long as I get some battle tactics that are actually achievable for Mega-Gargants. That would be nice. So, next, round 5. It's not going to be too significant, I don't think, because I don't believe there's a lot I can do from this point onwards, because I just don't have the models left. Had I managed to kill the Stonehorn there, on the turn when I used Eye for an Eye, I did then get the next turn, so I could have potentially, with this guy who can run and charge, I could have got him all the way up here and tried to do this one's mine on one of these heroes. So I could have got more points that way, but didn't manage to kill it. So my opponent just racks up more points easily via being on the objectives and having easy to complete battle tactics. I think one of the ogre ones is just don't be in combat, which is somehow a battle tactic. So, and then with mine, all I can do is just hold some objectives, pretty much. So I dive onto this one just to get an extra point. And that's all. So, end of the game. That's your final score. No grand strategies scored. So it is a loss. And I'm just going to pull up the pairings here so I can tell you about my next opponent. So it's not a huge loss, as you can see, but it's reasonable. So we've got 20, we've got 15, 19, 23 there, and for me I've got a whopping 16. So not a vast loss, but still a loss. In round 2, let's see. So it's the Jaws of Gallet. So this is the battle plan where the objectives disappear throughout the game, which is not great for Mega-Gargants, because what I want to do is sit on an objective and then not have to move. And if that objective can disappear, that does cramp my style a bit. So we'll see. And I'm up against, let's have a look at the list now, Blades of Corn, Army Subfaction, the Flayed. So, I took this picture after I've already had my first turn, actually. I believe I was given the first turn, because my opponent has a battle regiment. So, yeah, I think I was forced to go first here, but in my opponent's army we have a Slaughter Priest with Unholy Flames and Bronzed Flesh prayers. There is a Realm Gore Ritualist with Killer Instinct and Blood Sacrifice prayers. There's a Blood Secretor. There's another Realm Gore Ritualist with Bronzed Flesh and Blood Sacrifice and Tunnel Master. So, quite important there. There is a Bloodstoker. So, there is a Lord of Khorne on Juggernaut. That's the general. And so yeah, I think there's about 5 Galatian champions in there. Just little heroes that aren't very expensive. And then, battle line, there are 2 units of 6 Mighty Skull Crushers, so that's 400 point units there. So that's comparable to a Gargant almost. And then 2 units of 3 Mighty Skull Crushers. And those ones, I think, have the units of 3 have got the weapon that doesn't require you to charge to be at its full power, and the units of 6 have the more lance-like weaponry. So, what is my plan here? I don't feel like I can throw everything into the middle purely because of the terrain. It would get too congested in there. So the gap between the buildings is only big enough to facilitate 1 Mega-Gargant, unfortunately. So I can't just put everything in the middle, or they'll get stuck behind each other. I won't even be able to slam enemy monsters towards my other Gargants because there aren't any monsters against me in this one. So I'll be a bit stuck, so I have to spread out. I'm going to try and get towards as many objectives as possible while they're still online, and then hopefully get away as they shut down. I'm informed before the game that this Khorne army has a really bizarre special rule that isn't seen as very Khorne-like, and it's my opponent that was telling me that it's not very Khorne-like, by the way. That's not my thoughts on it. It is that some of the Blood Tithe points can be spent in my hero phase to move units, and I believe it's d6 inches, and they can move into combat, which is significant because it's on my turn, and that means that on my turn they can move into combat with one of my Mega-Gargants, and because I don't really have shooting attacks, I can't really clear them out until combat phase, meaning I'm not going to be able to charge anything that the Khorne actually care about. So they can just feed me feeble units in my own hero phase that I then have to spend the turn killing. And anything that survives against me, in their own turn, they can just move out of combat, just far enough away, and then when it's back to their turn again, they can, or when it's back on my turn, should I say, in the hero phase, they can just automatically move back into combat because they're moving just outside of 3, so they'll only need 1 inch to get back into combat. So it seems really bizarre for Khorne, the optimal way to play them, to be to throw in a little hero who wants to then move out of combat to not fight and then move in to prevent big fights from happening. Feels like Khorne should be rewarding play that results in massive amounts of bloodshed. And yeah, so for example, units are rewarded for their killing rather than just the army in total. So like a unit of 3 of these guys, every time they kill something, maybe they build up their own points and then they can cash the points in for some kind of favour, rather than it being army-wide and you being able to spend 1 of them to move easily replaceable little heroes into combat to tie up Mega-Gargants for a turn. So I feel like that's going to really hinder my progress in this game, but we shall see. On to the first round, and I've just moved out onto as many objectives as I can. Can't reach all of them, but that's the plan. So let's go back a second. So hold on, maybe I wasn't forced to go first. Let me look at the deployment map here. No, actually, it's not on the first turn. I just didn't take a picture of the close-up of the enemy army during deployment. That's what threw me off. So that is just the deployment, and my opponent is actually going first to stop me going onto the objectives. So big unit of 6 on here. I've put the mini-Gargants in front of the Megas so they can't be accessed. So I'm quite happy to lose all the minis if I can then countercharge into these big blocks. So the mini there, a mini there, my opponent getting onto the objectives and then trying some charges. Different Gay TV. What happened to Rem? Rem is currently on tour doing musical things with his band, The Fun Loving Criminals. He's in multiple bands actually, but I think that's the one that's touring at the moment. So he will be back from his tour sometime in the next couple of weeks, I think, at which point there will be more Andy and Rem based content coming. And Rem has even actually agreed to do a tournament, which is which day is that? It's late June, I think. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, so let us continue. We've got minis, we've got megas staring down the enemy, and there isn't a whole lot of charging happening at that stage, but you can see we've got 6 of them into this little guy. I've left enough of a gap between my minis and megas so that they're not going to easily just be able to pile in with a massive unit and then put everything into the mega. And they don't want to pile in with just a couple, because all that does is draw me into combat and get them killed faster. So if they were going to get any kind of pile into the mega, you would want it to be with all of them at once. So because he's in the way, they're not really going to accomplish that. So it would be a really bad idea to drag him into combat right now. So the mini takes some wounds, and this one's dead. That one's not dead. So this one died. The one down here hasn't been targeted. So I think this is actually a decent position, because the Gatebreaker is going to get into these guys. King Broad down here is probably going to get into them with any luck, because I've got the +1 charge aura that I can infect everyone with here. And then the Warstomper is going to go after these guys, and that's only a unit of 3. So there's the big unit of 6 there, there is the leader, and then there's all these crummy little heroes around that can clog me up, but we'll see if they manage to do any of that. So 5 points of corn in the first round. Well, the Gatebreaker gets into this unit here. You can see the little mini-gargants, the Man Crusher, did actually take one down there. So the Gatebreaker whomps them to death, which is great. The Warstomper kills most of this unit, but I do lose my mini-gargant there, who is already wounded. I've cast Mystic Shield on myself here with the Warstomper. And King Broad does not make a successful charge here, and neither does this mini. The mini-gargant actually wanted to charge this hero, so I used a command point with the sub-faction to declare an 18-inch charge on 3 dice to try and get that hero, which would mean I could kill it and also take this objective. But, unfortunately, failed. King Broad failed as well. So, priority roll. I would say it's pretty critical, because if I get it, King Broad is almost certainly going to wipe the floor with this unit. The Gatebreaker can run and charge, so can get all the way over here, and then try and charge this unit of 6, and try and kill them. And the Warstomper will be able to finish off this guy. However, what's potentially cramping my style is that if it's my turn next, the enemy can move units in my hero phase. So who could they clog up with that? At the moment, it's not the worst, because I don't think there's an enemy hero around here that could clog him up. They could still move and get in his way a little bit and stop him moving closer. But it's less annoying at the moment. I don't think the enemy heroes are as close as they could be. So it's going to be difficult to stop Broad, for instance. This unit could get closer, but I want to fight them anyway. So all I'll do is lose my charge bonus. So I go with eye for an eye. And you'll see there, I've got the 3 points. Broad does end up killing a few of these guys, but there's one alive there. And I think they did actually move in my hero phase and built a little line there to stop Broad getting out. And also it stops this guy charging off at the heroes. So they're kind of tied up. And one of the objectives is offline as well now. So this one disappears because I got first go. My opponent has chosen an objective to destroy, and it's this one. So Broad does some good work there. The Gatebreaker is going after that unit, but of course they're going to try and redeploy, and unfortunately it's a bit too far. And the Warstomper doesn't even kill this chump. So yeah, that's a very bad round. This charge unsuccessful, and still a model in that unit. So King Broad, even if it was entirely my turns for the rest of the game, I don't think King Broad could participate in the game at all, because in my turn my opponent can just use 1 blood tithe point, move a hero within 3 inches. That means I can't charge anybody. And then next turn, even if it was mine again, another hero can get into range to join in. So unless he gets really careless and puts his heroes so close together that via piling in I can then fight 2 of them at once, then there's no way King Broad is going to join in with the rest of the game, unfortunately, because of that really bizarre, not very Khorne-like rule. So, yeah, because I think, is it Slanesh that has like the temptation dice? where it's really thematic. You can offer your opponent certain dice. And that actually makes a lot of sense. Khorne, you think they should be rewarded for there being a huge massacre. Like, however many wounds are dished out on either side during that turn, at the end of the turn, maybe you should be able to choose a reward based on how many wounds there were in the previous turn, regardless of which side inflicted them. And you cash in that reward immediately, and then the units themselves that are doing cool things and killing units, they build up their own pool, and then they can get, like, personal unit rewards. That seems like it would be much more cool and thematic than just this blood tithe points that can then be spent on quite un-Khorne-like behaviour. So it's just odd design to me that isn't very thematic, which is weird because some of the other factions do have very thematic rules. So I do pick up some points though. So momentum not quite on my side yet, but we'll see how it goes. My opponent goes eye for an eye. Can probably kill something this turn, even if it's a mini-Gargant. Or the Gatebreaker, who is wounded and has this big unit of 6 staring at him. Whether they want to fight him, we'll see. So, this little dude, the best thing for him to do, in a really bizarre, un-Khorne-like way, is to move out of combat, and then when it's my turn, cash in a blood tithe point and move back into combat. So I can't kill him this turn, but he's tying me up for the next turn. So anytime one model is left alive against Khorne in this situation, you're not going anywhere. And could even be used to tie up this guy instead, if the Warstomper isn't deemed as much of a threat. So you can see there's little heroes waiting, just waiting to pounce when it's my turn, waiting to jump into range of King Brod. And these guys are getting onto the objective. And they do charge the Gatebreaker. And there's some wounds being dished out. This mini-Gargant may well die, because that's the general there, who is a Lord of Khorne on Juggernaut. So, Finest Hour and all-out defense played on the Gatebreaker. Try and keep him alive. And I do, but I do lose this mini-Gargant down here. So eye for an eye is successful. So, I've still got all my Megas left, but I think I'm out of minis at this point. Just Megas, and this one is heavily deaded. So, in the next round, so that was the end of the round. So if I get the priority here, what happens? Well, things move out of combat with me, as you can see. But on my turn, actually I move out of combat with the enemy there to keep him alive, and the Warstomper stays there and kills that final knight, that Skull Crusher, because he's tying me up. And this one just moves out of combat because I would almost certainly die. The only reason I would stay in combat is if I wanted to do my 50-50 chance at doing 4d6 mortal wounds. But it's a 50-50 shot, and I could just stay alive and force them to deal with me next turn, rather than stay there, almost certainly die, 50-50 chance of not killing any of them, and at which point they just go and kill the Warstomper. So I might keep him alive by moving out of combat there. King Brod is out the game because his objectives disappeared, and he's just going to be fed enemy heroes. So just the 1 point. And as you can see, the Gatebreaker is now dead, and King Brod is just having units weasel around him, so they can move on him in my turn. And my opponent picking up lots of points there. In my turn, often I'm not choosing to go first here, I don't think. I may be just being given the turn because my opponent knows that I can just have heroes thrown into my Gargants to tie them up. But I do get the turn, so I can't remember if I choose this one or not. But King Brod is stuck, but the Warstomper does actually get to do something this turn, charges into them. But there's no objective here anymore. Because obviously if you go second, you pick which objective turns off. So if I'd gone first, or if I was going second, I would pick this one, obviously, because the enemy are all over it and I'm never getting to it. So it's a good reason to go second. So the Khorne here, when they go second, it doesn't hurt them at all because they can still move in my hero phase, and they can choose which objectives to turn off. So some lands being desecrated there, very easy. And my opponent's racking up points. I'm getting no points at all at this stage because the objectives are being turned off. and there's not a great deal going on, just more points being scored, nothing for me, lots for my opponent, and that's how it's going to finish. So, started mediocre scoring and it trailed off to nothing. My opponent was able to score consistently throughout with battle tactics that were actually achievable, which is nice. The Khorne battle tactics were quite good. A lot of them were... can't remember if they were just total autocomplete or whether we had to actually do something for it. But usually, I find that enemy battle tactics are just a choice they make that doesn't require any dice rolling that scores them a battle tactic. Much like Desecrate Their Lands, but that's really the only one that I can do that's like that. All the others require me doing a dice roll of some sort. And often it's several dice rolls in a row. So I think the Sun's battle tactics are definitely an uphill struggle. So very low scoring for me there. So let's see. For that round, the final score was 27-8 against me. So, yes. So I don't think I've added the grand strategy down onto this one. But that does apply. On to round 3 then. So, 2 losses. And what do we have here? We have, in the presence of idols, so some objectives, and you have 3 idol units per side. And then when they kill another idle unit with an idle unit, you get a bonus victory point. So, pretty straightforward. And obviously I've got 3 Mega-Gargants. They're obviously going to be my idle units. And my opponent in this round is running... let me have a look at the list now. So, it's Bone Reapers. I don't even remember if I've played against Ossiarch Bone Reapers once before. I probably have at least once. I know I've not played against Caradron Overlords before, even though there are a lot of them about now. Never played against them. I don't remember if I've ever played against Bone Reapers. I don't specifically remember a game where there were Bone Reapers present. So, it could be the first time. So, there is Catacross, Mortarch of the Necropolis, there, who is 440 points, so that's like Gargant level, so obviously very tough. There is a Mortizan Bone Shaper, who is around here somewhere, it might be that one. There are 2 units of 20 Mortec Guard, one there and one there. There are 6 Necropolis Stalkers, which are these big bad boys here, and 10 Cavalos Death Riders, which are in 2 units. So there's 5 there and 5 there. Now, there's also the Bone Tithe Shrieker Endless spell. What is notable about this army's special rules that is going to impact me? So, there are debuffs that are given out from this army that do not require any dice rolls. All you have to do is look at the enemy and say, I choose you, you are now -1 to hit. Look at another enemy unit and say, I choose you, you are now -1 to hit, and you're on -1 on your save. Which against Gargants is a bit of a nightmare, because that's half my army that's being debuffed. If it was against, for example, one of my Stormcast armies and you picked 2 units to debuff, it's less of a big deal because I've got lots of other units that can do the fighting for that turn. Against Gargants, half my army being at -1 to hit is a very big deal. And in fact, it's like 2/3 of my army that can actually hit hard that's being debuffed, potentially. So, it's a bad time. And also, all the skeletons in this army explode on death and can do mortal wounds as well, which is obviously not great because I have to fight them all in close combat because I don't really have shooting. So I don't think it's a great matchup for me, but the scenario, at least it only has 3 objectives. So I'm not having to dance around on 5 different objectives for the whole game. So what's my plan? Not get hit in the Mega-Gargants too early, try and take some charges on the little fellas, and then send the Megas in and just try and crush as much stuff as possible and sit on objectives. So very straightforward, nothing fancy at all. First turn, I choose a battle tactic that I can't possibly accomplish just to get rid of it because there's nothing I can actually do in the first turn. And my opponent's battle regiment and forces me to go first. So any battle tactic I chose would be a total waste. I could have chosen potentially Desecrate Their Lands, but with the deployment, let's see, I took this picture after deployment, but deployment was back like here. So the things I could desecrate would be maybe that or that. But to get to them, I think I would have to have a very specific set of circumstances go in my favour. I would have to succeed with King Brod's Prayer, which is on a 3+, to give me extra movement. I would then have to auto-run a model to get to there, and I think it would, based on the enemy units that are nearby, it would have to be a Mega-Gargant as well. So I decided not to even bother, because I'd be leaving them out flapping in the wind, and the chances of me succeeding with the prayer, I don't really want to throw away Desecrate their lands on a 2/3 chance of succeeding. So I decided I'm just not going to have a battle tactic this turn. I'm just going to jump on the objectives and say, come at me, bro. Bone bro. So there we go, 3 points. And what are the enemy going to do about that? Well, -1 to hit on the Gatebreaker, with a little sad face to show you exactly how I feel about debuffs. For anyone who's heard my previous reports, you'll know how I feel about rules that prevent the enemy from doing cool stuff. Now, some of the Gargant rules, you can argue, are kind of in that vein. Like some of the monstrous actions, like roaring the enemy to stop them having commands played on them, even though commands are kind of a boring, straightforward, always the same type deal anyway, so I don't think that's a cool thing you're depriving the enemy of doing. But I prefer armies that do cool things on their own rather than preventing the enemy from doing cool things, is my general ethos on rules. So, we have got the Necropolis Stalkers are going to try and take down this Man Crusher, and these Knights are eyeing up that one potentially. And the Mortek Guard get into this one, Necropolis Stalkers into this one, so they could both die here. I all-out defense this guy, and I think I roar these as well, so the chance of him surviving is decent, the chance of this one surviving is slim to none. And this one dies, and this one dies. They're all dead, but there are 2 juicy units I can sink my tentacles into now. So this, by the way, denotes the fact that it's an idle unit. My opponent's idle units, if I just go back and show you deployment, are the big guy here, this unit, and this unit. So these 3 are the idle units. So if I kill them with a Mega-Gargant, I get bonus points. So there is an idle unit right here. So I'm going to go for it in my turn, if I get the next go. So my opponent doesn't score many points, didn't have a battle tactic that was that achievable particularly, and wasn't going to take enough objectives off me to do, for example, gaining momentum. You have to hold more objectives than the enemy, and wasn't willing to throw away the Bone Shaper to do one of the Galatian Champion battle tactics. So just the 1 point for taking the middle objective off me. I do get the first crack at the next round, and I go for gaining momentum. I'm pretty sure I can kill a unit, and the Gatebreaker and the Warstomper whomp the Necropolis Stalkers, which is a really significant unit actually. That's 440 points, and I whittle down the Mortek Guard as well. King Brod has gone up here and taken care of those Knights, so that's nice, the Death Riders. So I've actually whittled down the enemy significantly now. And how many wounds have I taken in retaliation? It's only 2 on Brod. I think it's that 13 maybe on the Warstomper, and about 5 on the Gatebreaker. So I've lost some mini Gargants, but I've got my Megas into the action, and I've dealt with some serious units. Turn 2 for the enemy, eye for an eye, feeling confident that they can kill something. So yeah, I got a bonus point for killing an idle unit with an idle unit that turn, so good scoring. And in this round, so I've put Finest Hour on the Warstomper because he's in harm's way, and my opponent puts the -1 to hit and -1 save on the Warstomper, and just plain old -1 to hit on the Gatebreaker. So I assume that these debuffs have a range, which is why only one of them was applied previously, but it's still, there's no dice roll involved at all. So it seems like everything cool that the Mega-Gargants want to do requires a dice roll. Everything done against them doesn't always require a dice roll. So an imbalance I'm noticing there. And there is another, in one of the later games, there's something specifically that I'm going to compare with Stormcast special rules later on as well, for anyone who is interested in hearing about that. So, these guys do not want to draw the Gatebreaker into combat. However, this guy I think he is actually a monster. So I could potentially slam the Mortarch of the Necropolis over here with the Warstomper and then fight him with the Gatebreaker. So that's if he's a monster. You know what, I'm going to look up right now before I go any further. Let's see if he is a monster. So it's Catacross. Let's have a look at his scroll right now. Catacross, let's have a look. Keywords. Death. Ossiarch, Bone Reapers, Mortis, Hero, Mortarch. Nope, not a monster. So that I now realise at that point in the game that it's not an option. Not a monster, despite having a monstery kind of profile. So can therefore not be suplexed over here, which would have been great. So they do manage to whomp the Warstomper as a result of cancelling out his finest hour with that, so not much of an armour save going on. Now, at the end of that turn, 3 more points. Not a lot of objective taking done by the Bone Reapers, so I've got a good lead built up. This next priority roll, you can probably see in this situation, is absolutely critical. If I get it, this unit, for example, very likely dead. I can put my Gargants in where I want them. I'd want to play it safe, so I wouldn't want to go for him because he's too tough and I can't get to him with both of them. So I might put, for example, Brod into these guys. I could even put both of them into the same unit, or I could put this guy into the Knights and not bring anyone else into combat and then kill 2 units. If I don't go next, there's going to be 4 ridiculous units, 3 of them very powerful, that are all going to converge on this one guy probably. And even if they can't all fit, 3 units on him would be good enough probably, and then 1 unit going after Brod perhaps, or not going after anyone maybe. But I think this is a very important role here. If I don't get this priority and this guy dies, I would say, even though I'm in the lead, it's probably game over at that point. So, who's going to get it? It's the Bone Reapers. So, gaining momentum, they want to kill him and hold more objectives than me. And he's obviously hit with the debuffs. And I do put Finest Hour on him as well. And let's see who wants a piece of the action then. So, the Knights actually go over there to claim that objective. Everyone else is going to steam in and try and murder the Gatebreaker. He's got 30 wounds left. Can they inflict them all? Dun dun dun. No. So, he lives. So, they do take this objective by having lots of bodies on it, and this one, and hold more than me, but do not get the battle tactics. They do not kill the Gatebreaker. So that keeps things interesting. Keeps it interesting, but not that interesting, I would say, because this guy can't stick around here, otherwise he's dead. If he wants to live, he has to actually leave combat. So, had I got the previous priority, I'd be able to be dealing damage before they get to hit me. Now, obviously, I can't. So if he wants to live, he has to escape. And then King Brod can come in, do some killing, and then I would have to get the double, and then charge him back in, and then do some killing when there's less units around him, basically. Because if he stays there, he's toast. So, on my turn, still with a lead, I'm going to desecrate the lands, and King Brod, he's not going to charge anyone this turn on his own. I'm just going to hope for the double. He's going to go and desecrate this bit of terrain while I've got the chance, and get some easy points. And I'm not sure if King Brod's enough to take this objective off them. They've got quite a lot of guys in there. So let's have a look. No. So I get my battle tactic and get 1 point for holding this objective here, but the Gatebreaker moves away. And the only way he was actually able to get out of range, I think, was because of King Brod's prayer for the extra movement, which I used. Oh, by the way, in one of my later games, someone did actually inform me that King Brod's prayer, you can only use each one of the 3 enhancements once during the game. And I just didn't read that far in the War Scroll until that point. So I think I've probably been attempting the same one multiple times in each game until then. But I think this is the first time I've used movement in this one, though, because I chose not to go for it in the first round. So he gets away from combat, I've desecrated the lands, built up some more points. I'm not going to outkill the enemy here, because these little bonesmen can come back to life quite easily as well. So all I want to do is just score points. If I can kill something, that would be nice, but it would have to be a full unit or it's not really worth it. So who's going to get priority? If I get priority, I'm going to put both the Gargants into this unit, even though he's not got much health left. I can do his 50-50 4d6 mortal wounds attack, which would kill a lot of them, and Brod could hopefully finish them off. And that would mean I take this objective as well if I kill them all, because there's only those there now. So I think that would be enough to take it off them. My opponent gets priority though, so what's that going to mean? It's going to mean the Gatebreaker gets attacked and everyone else can go after King Brod. So let's see if that plays out. So my opponent wants to desecrate this bit of my land and throws some debuffs on King Brod. And everyone seems to be going for the Brodmeister, apart from this unit, which are kind of walking a tightrope between the desecration of lands and trying to kill the Gatebreaker with not many models. By the way, if you haven't recognised any of the human hands or anything in this game, my opponent in this game is actually the proprietor of the TSN Arena, who is of course Mr. Rob of the Honest Wargamer fame, who was participating in this event. And this list was made for him by someone else though. He did stress. And he felt that it wasn't very strong. I think it's just very strong in this particular matchup because of those debuffs that affect a unit, and my units are all very expensive and don't perform very well when debuffed. So it's quite powerful in this matchup, but in general it wasn't doing very well, which is why it's been matched up with me in this round when we're both on 2 losses up to this point. So King Brod gets surrounded and debuffed into oblivion. He's going to start taking wounds. However, Mr. Gatebreaker actually survives and manages to kill some of them, but they do still desecrate that piece of terrain. So look at that, he's got 1 wound left, and Brod is dead, sadly. So 4 points scored, and on my turn I take some of them down, but then I'm dead as well. So not much I can really do at the end. Score a couple more points, but not much, and my opponent just going to spread out and try and score as many points as possible, gets another 5 and a grand strategy. So the final score in that round, it's actually fairly close. So it's a 14-18 loss for me, which, when you consider that I think I lost every single priority roll, isn't the worst. And yeah, had I got, for example, this priority roll in this situation here, with 1 Gargant down there and 1 here, I would have definitely been able to score more points. Even if I didn't attack anyone, I could probably get onto some different objectives, get around the place maybe. I could have killed something, so probably could have got a draw out of it if I'd got one of those priority rolls maybe. And had I got all the priority rolls and had a nice juicy double turn earlier on in the game, could have even got a win out of it maybe, who knows. But alas, it's a loss. A close one though, so can't be too dissatisfied with that. On to day 2 and the prize of Gallet. So, on this one, the objectives become active over the course of the game, and the first one that becomes active has to be one on the centre line, and it's whoever goes second each round chooses which one becomes active. And I am up against... Let me have a look at the enemy list. It's Stormcast Eternals, Knights Excelsior, so their bonus doesn't actually affect them in this game, because they would get bonuses against units that have more models than them, but obviously all my units are single model units, so they don't get that bonus at all. There is a Lord Relictor in there somewhere. There he is. So with the Mirror Shield, so can't be shot at from far away. Got Translocation, High Priest, so rerollable 2-up, teleporting, and Stubborn as a Rhinox, so he's worth 10 on objectives. There is a Lord Celestant on Stardrake, which you don't see very often, but it's not bad actually. It's about the cost of a Gargant. Doesn't have as many wounds, of course, but it's got some good attacks, it's got a good shooting attack, and it's got some -3 rend, which is very rare in the Stormcast army. I think it's mostly just the Stardrake and the Celestant Prime that have Rend 3. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that inherently has Rend 3 in the Stormcast list. So that has Celestial Instincts as well, so it can retreat and shoot, or retreat and charge. There is a Battle Mage with Wild Form, who is down there, and which is a combo that you see the Mage with Wild Form, you see the Relictor with Translocate, and then you see some Fulminators, so that they can be Wild Formed and then teleported away and then make an easier charge. With the plus to the charge, of course. Then there are 10 Protectors who start off the table. They have 4 Star Soul Maces, so they can be quite scary. There are 5 Liberators and 5 Vindictors, who are just your generic... They're not really chaff, because no Stormcast unit, apart from Aetherwings, who are actually in there, the Aetherwings are here. They're definitely chaff. Nothing else I would really qualify as complete chaff, because they're not that cheap. Aetherwings are by far the cheapest unit in the army here. And so there's a Galatian Sharpshooters Battalion and Battle Regiment, so I think we're the same drops actually. And as a result of that, I actually get to decide who goes first, and I choose to go second because I want to pick which objective comes online, and I also want the chance of double turn, and I don't want to get double turned by long strikes, because there are 2 units of long strike raptors, one of which is on the table, which is here, and the other one is in the sky. So, nice cinematic shots there, staring down the enemy. My deployment, I've got these 2 megas near each other, because the Stardrake is over there. I don't want... The Warstomper is obviously the worst one at facing down the Stardrake, but the Stardrake was deployed, I think, after the Warstomper. And I want these guys in the middle. These are the 2 most powerful Mega-Gargants, and I want them on the objectives. And I'm going to activate this one first. Other ones I would like to become active during the game. This one. And after that, just any that are close by, so really any of them. I just wanted the one, first of all, that's furthest away from the Stardrake, and it's close to 2 of my megas. I did have the option of activating the middle one first, and I did think about it, because that means whichever one becomes active after that, it's going to be close to the other one that's active, so I've got less ground to cover. However, I decided to pick the one that's furthest away from the Stardrake. I think that thing's the biggest threat, apart from the Protectors that are in the sky. So, I've got this guy who can quite easily get over there. If the Stardrake ends up in a fight with the Warstomper, the Gatebreaker can quite easily go and join in. And the Gatebreaker would be a lot of fun if the Stardrake, for example, stacks its saves up, and then I do my 50-50 chance at 4d6 mortal wounds. That would be hilarious against a Stardrake. So we've got the Vindictors on this objective in the first turn. Stardrake moves up, and the Aetherwings are just sitting in the middle as a bit of chaff, and also to give +1 to hit, because the long strikes in the hero phase, they do a bit of shooting as well at the Gatebreaker and do 4 wounds. The other unit has come down over here, and after all the shooting, 14 wounds have been dished out to the Gatebreaker and 8 wounds to the Warstomper, which is from the Stardrake, who's got quite a decent shooting attack. So, I gave away the first turn. I haven't suffered massive losses as a result of it. Some wounds, but not a huge amount. So I'm quite pleased with that. You don't want to get doubled when you're against long strikes. That's my dream when I'm playing Stormcast. I want to go second and then get the double turn with my long strikes. That's the ultimate dream. And especially if you've got units coming down from the sky as well. They move in, kill something. If you get the double turn, you then get another chance, if you kill it, to go and charge something else. So I want to deprive the Stormcast of that. So now I could get a double turn. So I'm going to have to probably kill the Aetherwings with something first, because they're in the way of the Megas getting through. I can move over them, but I can't actually make up enough ground to put my base on the other side of them and be 3 inches away. So I'm going to have to stop short of them. Over on this side, I'm going to double charge the Stardrake with my Man Crusher and the Warstomper. And then, what I was describing earlier, when I use the Beast Grapple to make it strike last, the Stardrake and my Warstomper would both strike last. But that means that I can fight with all my other stuff first, including the mini that would be in there, and then when we enter the strike last phase, the Warstomper would go first before the Stardrake. So, assuming I actually succeed with the monstrous rampage. So my opponent gets just 2 points there. There's only one objective online, so holds 1 and holds more than me. So that's the maximum. There was no battle tactic that was done. I think he just chose an impossible one, because there was nothing really that he wanted to accomplish in that round, battle tactic wise. So it's a difficult one to score battle tactics on in the first round. Got a nice camera angle of the eyeballs there. Very nice. So, in my turn, I go for gaining momentum and want to kill the unit of Vindictors that were there, and obviously King Brod's done it quite easily. The Gate Crusher. So the reason he's over there and not over here is because when I charged I got right up to the Ether Wings, and when I charged them, I rolled really high and was able to step over them to the other side of the unit and fight them from this side, which means I'm closer to the other enemy units now. And the Stardrake has taken wounds as well. It's looking quite good over here though. I've got a nice spread of Megas. The Mega-Gargants, who are usually on the front line screening, in this particular game, they're kind of hanging back waiting for objectives to come online, because they can be my mobile force to go and claim them potentially later, because they don't need to do much fighting because they're pretty crummy. Over on this side I've dealt out some good damage, which isn't that visible on these little counters, but obviously it's gone onto a second counter. So I think I've done about 12 or 14 wounds, so it's not far away from death, the Stardrake. And it's gone quite well over there. I haven't taken too much in return onto the Warstomper. So 4 victory points for me, I get my battle tactic, and I also claim an objective, and I hold more than the enemy as well. So 4 points. My opponent gets first crack at the second round, which means I can again pick an objective to come online. My opponent goes for eye for an eye. I choose the middle objective, so we've got this area to defend now, where I've got 2 Mega-Gargants waiting. Now, with it being my opponent's turn, the Protectors are almost certainly going to come in. The long strikes aren't under threat, so they can all shoot this turn. However, the one they mostly want to shoot is this heavily wounded Gatebreaker, and he's kind of obscured from some of them by this bit of terrain here, so they're going to have to move, and not all of them are going to be able to see him. So, I put Finest Hour on him, knowing that he's going to come under attack. He's the most likely one to die because he's got the most wounds dealt to him, and also all-out defense against the shooting. So do start taking wounds, he's up to 20 now after a bit of shooting. The Protectors come in and they make their 9-inch charge into King Brod, which isn't ideal, because they are pretty tasty. Okay, this is where we get to the fun stuff. So, in combat, the Stardrake, I'm very pleased that it didn't leave the combat, because I want to kill it right now, because it could have flown away and shot at me. The fact that it stayed there means that it's open for me to do the Colossal Slam. The big suplex. The Warstomper picks up a Stardrake, slams it down right here, which is within 3 inches of the Gatebreaker. So now I've got 2 Megas who can both fight the Stardrake, which is amazing. So that succeeds on a 3+. So all the cool things I want to do require a 3+ or 4+ roll usually. So King Brod takes some wounds, but I'd get all-out defense on him, and the Protectors, even though they've got Star Soul Maces, the Maces don't actually do that much in this round, and their rend isn't as amazing as certain other units. So over here, the Stardrake, because it's their turn, Stardrake does get to go first here, and does some wounds. And let's see, King Brod doesn't actually do much at all. I think he just does 2 wounds to somebody, so pretty terrible on his attacks for King Brod. However, the 2 Mega-Gargants do kill off the Stardrake, which is great. Got rid of that. And my opponent actually scores nothing for the round. Doesn't take the objectives off me, doesn't score a battle tactic. So 0 points, so this is going really well so far. And in my turn, you'll notice that the Gatebreaker has steamed into the Protectors. I did my 50-50 chance at doing 4d6 mortal wounds and succeeded, and that was my roll there. So it's about average, and I managed to kill 4 of them, which is obviously nice. And then King Brod is still in there, of course, and then he kills off the rest of them. So all the protectors are dead. My Warstomper kills off that line of liberators that were here. The Mini-Gargants moving up as well. So we're just slaughtering left and right here. It's looking very bad for the Stormcast. They're really just down to long strikes, the Lord Relictor, and a Wizard at this stage. So it's looking really unhealthy for them. I've not really lost anything. There's some Gargants that are heavily wounded, but I did manage to desecrate this land as well with my Mega-Gargant there, the Warstomper. So, lots of points. My opponent is stuck on 2 and I'm on 9, so going really well. My opponent does get the next turn though. Had I got the next turn here, it would have definitely been game over because all the long strikes probably would have been eaten, and that would have been the end. So my opponent does get a chance to score some more points, wants to desecrate this land, which he can easily do with the Lord Relictor, who's just going to teleport over there with translocation to get 2 easy points, and also score this objective. So this one has come online now. And the long strikes are just hiding as much as they can and then unloading with their shooting, and they do actually manage to take down the wounded Gatebreaker, which was here. So he's dead now. So it's just the Warstomper, who's quite heavily wounded, and King Brod, who is not that heavily wounded, remaining. So, 3 points picked up there. Onto my turn 3. This Mini-Gargant is chasing after the Lord Relictor. This one is just dipping his toe onto the objective. Warstomper kills the Wizard. I think he just kills it with the impact hits and rather than actually having to attack it, which is cool. And King Brod gets into the long strikes, takes a few wounds from the Unleash Hell, but does manage to kill them all. So there's really just a unit of long strikes up there now against all this lot. So I'm scoring more points. There's Lord Relictor left as well, of course, but I'm going first in the next round, so Lord Relictor gets eaten. The other long strikes get eaten, and I can just spread out onto the objectives and score loads of points. So yeah, that's the final score. Get my grand strategy, and my opponent can't score any more than 5. So really depressing game for the Stormcast. With that kind of list for the Stormcast, you need your units that are coming down from the sky to perform, you need your shooting to perform, and you need to be killing a Gargant early. If you don't kill any of them by about turn 3, you're in for a bad time, because as soon as they get into combat with anything that's squishy, it's gone. The long strikes don't last 2 seconds against Gargants if I get to them. The Stardrake got killed, and maybe the Stardrake was quite aggressive when it didn't really need to be, and it was on its turn that I was able to get the suplex on it and then kill it with 2 Gargants, so it could have left combat and still shot at me if it wanted to in that turn. So maybe the Stardrake could have used itself differently, perhaps, and been more of a support rather than getting itself in harm's way. So that's one thing I would say for the Stormcast possibly there. Apart from that, once that went down and the Protectors got killed, 4 of them from the Gatebreaker's 4+ 4d6 mortal wound attack, which I really like, even when it doesn't work. It's only going to work 50% of the time, but when it does work, it's hilariously good. And King Brod does the work as well at the second attempt. So that is obviously a very juicy, spicy, succulent win there. And it is 5 points against 23. So very juicy. But you can see, even when I'm totally wiping the floor with the enemy, I can't score maximum, because I run out of battle tactics I can accomplish with this army. They're just not there. I would love it if the book battle tactics for the Suns were ridiculously easy like they are for some of the other factions. If there was one that was, for example, if you charge a unit with a Man-Crusher Gargant, here's a battle tactic for you, here's 2 points. That sounds ridiculous, and it sounds stupid even. It sounds like a terrible rule. It sounds like a terrible idea for a battle tactic, but that's the kind of thing other factions actually have. Sometimes even easier than that. So hopefully the next season, the next General's Handbook, presents more battle tactic opportunities for the Sons of BEHEMAT, is all I can say on that. So I took pictures of the various armies during the lunch on day 2 when they were laid out for the Coolest Army Award, and obviously I'm not going to win events with this Sons of BEHEMAT army that I don't have much experience with. So really I'm just trying to rack up Coolest Army Awards, and I'm always going to be in with a shout because they are cool, they get a lot of attention because it's obviously heavily converted tentacles and eyeballs, things everyone loves, obviously. So always in with a shouter for coolest army when you take something like that that's got a lot of time put into it. So here are the Stormcast that I just faced, which are nice. There's my army there, all laid out, ready to attract people's eyeballs with their eyeballs and tentacles, hoping to rack up those votes. And here is some Sylvaneth. Now, it's hard to tell in still images, but there's a very interesting kind of metallic colour on the danglage from the trees and also on these flying insects as well. So I suppose you can see it a little bit. And I think it's kind of a clear red paint over the top of metallic. So that's very interesting. And because I think that looks really interesting and cool, this is the one that I voted for as coolest army. And then we've got some halflings here, which I think were representing, was it the Free Guild perhaps, or Sylvaneth? Not 100% sure. We've got some lovely, lovely demonic creatures here. I'm going to assume it's Khorne, because obviously they're blood letters there, but they're not in very Cornish colours, are they? And there's the other half of that halfling army. There's the Bone Reapers. Some of them weren't laid out particularly. There's some more Stormcast here with some interesting conversion work going on there. There's a Celestant Prime. And I think the interesting points on this army, all the heads are different, of course, different helmets. And I think all the heroes have been converted so that they're all women, which is a cool take, because you generally get a choice with lots of the foot infantry, because you get some male and some female bodies in there, but you don't often get a choice with the heroes. So interesting theme. We've got the ogres that I faced in the first round here, which are of course very cool. We've got several Caradhran Overlord armies. Here's one of them with some, I think I have seen this at an event before, but I haven't played against it. So it's very cool, obviously. This is the kind of army that's definitely going to get some votes for coolest army, because big robots in place of the flying ships. Very cool. Lots of balloon lads as well. And this guy, who is looking very Dr. Robotnik-like there. And some other Caradhran Overlords. And you can see how this particular player has got round the issue of the flying stands being so flimsy. They do tend to snap quite easily, so here there's some pillars in place. And we've got some more Caradhran Overlords. Yeah, they're all over the place. Woo! Okay, next game. Oh, actually, I'll tell you that the Coolest Army Award, while we're on these pictures, was actually won by the one that I voted for, which is this one here. So, very colourful, lots of tuft action, lots of shiny red, and that caught enough people's eyes to win the award. On to the final game, ours for the taking. So, home objective, centre objective. You have one home objective. If you control the enemy home objective, you score 2 points. If you control your own, you score 1. If you control the centre, you score 1. If you control the centre with a Galatian champion, you score a bonus point. There, that's it. That's the scenario. I have no Galatian champions, so I'm obviously never getting a bonus point. However, I am really good at holding objectives, and there's only 3 of them. So, I'm against the Sylvaneth that I just saw with the nice metallic colours, who are obviously crowded around their wildwood there. So what is my game plan here? You can see I've put 2 big Mega-Gargants over on this side, staring at the enemy home objective. My home objective has 3 minis on it. My plan is for them to not move for the entire game, because my opponent has lots of ways of teleporting. I do not want to leave this objective open at all to be teleported onto, so I'm just going to put mini Gargants on it for the whole game. King Brod is going to try and go for the enemy home objective, and the Gatebreaker, if there's anything comes over here to fight King Brod, he can go that way to help. If anything comes towards the middle, he can help the Warstomper fight over the centre ground. So that is the plan. I'll go through my opponent's list though for this round. Let me just pull that up here. So, this is Heartwood, and there is an Arch Revenant in there. Let me get the close-ups. The Arch Revenant is this one, I think. It's hard to tell because they kind of blend into all the trees and they're hidden behind the trees. So I think that's the Arch Revenant there. That one has Stubborn as a Rhinox, so worth 10 on objectives. There's a Tree Lord Ancient, who is 330 points, who's obviously a bit of a beast. And the one thing that's shenanigan-y and annoying about this army that's going to be difficult to deal with is the fact that on their turn they can fight you and then just teleport away with no dice roll required. Yes, you heard me right. After they fight, they just decide, you know what, I don't feel like being here anymore to take the swing back from your Mega-Gargant, so I'm just going to go away and be over here instead. So that's their thing. And they can even do that with this very powerful unit of 6 Kurnoth Hunters with Scythes, which is 500 points. That's Mega-Gargant level unit there. And when I hear about that really powerful ability that they can use, it made me think, Stormcast, when they had a really powerful ability, which was being able to shoot in the hero phase, and you could use that on the long strikes, they then amended it so that you couldn't use it on a reinforced unit. So they brought it back into balance. I think being able to disappear from combat with 6 Kurnoth Hunters after striking is obscenely powerful, and I would argue that a similar amendment could be justified there. Just an extra line that says this may not be used on a unit that is reinforced. Something like that. I think having 6 of them, that's a Mega-Gargant level unit, 500 points, punching you in the face and then teleporting away automatically with no dice roll. I don't know about that, but that's what the rule is, so we're going to have to deal with it. There are also 3 Kurnoth Hunters with bows there. There are, let's see, there's these 3, which I think are the Revenant Seekers, these 3. So these are the ones who have the ability where they just decide that a model is going to come back to life from a nearby unit as well, I think. That might be on a 2+, rather than just I look at it and it happens. I'm not sure about that one. Then there is these guys here. There are 2 units of Tree Revenants. So there's one there and there's one somewhere else. So they are the ones that can just teleport whenever they want with no dice roll required. So kind of like the Knight Zephyros. Just bounce around wherever you like, no dice roll, teleport, as long as it's not too close to the enemy, of course. Everyone else is going to be limited in their teleporting between Wildwood and Wildwood terrain pieces. So all the terrain, some of them have been chosen to behave as Wildwood. Now, when I'm looking at this setup, I'm thinking this could be the Gatebreaker's time to shine. If I can get the Gatebreaker over there and smash to rubble the enemy terrain piece, then all the units nearby might take D3 mortal wounds, which is cool. So that'd be a fun thing for the Gatebreaker if he manages to get over there. My opponent is going first with Battle Regiment, so my opponent is choosing to go first. And chooses Cunning Maneuver, which is going to be an auto-complete, because obviously just a hero gets onto here. So the Kurnoth Scythes pop down here, and they have an ability on them, which I think is from the Endless Spell, which gives them +3 to charge, which is great, of course, when you're teleporting 9 inches away, makes it very easy to complete the charge compared to normal. So they're going after the Warstomper, and he takes a bit of damage from spells or shooting. I think it's shooting. They do make the charge, of course. They deal out quite a lot of wounds. He's up to 24, and then they teleport away back into the woods again, back to safety. So, if in theory, until I reach them, they can just do that each turn as you approach, with no chance of striking back at them. Another way that that could be mitigated would be if, for example, if it was a command that you had to use on them to teleport them back after combat. In which case, roaring the unit would stop use of a command ability on them. Something along those lines. Just some things. I think as it is, I think that's very, very powerful. So 5 points there in the first round. Onto my turn, I'm going to desecrate this enemy land here. And you can see that it's got something on it that says that it's acting as a Wildwood as well. So I'm going to desecrate that, and I'm going to move everyone. Try and get them into the fight. So you can see that this little hero here is going to be attacked. Warstomper is going to attack there. The Gatebreaker is coming up as well into the middle. And King Brod is just moving on to the enemy home objective. So I'm going to start scoring some big points. But I have to stay alive as well. And if I got a double turn, it would be very nice here. So I score 6 points. I do get 2 for this one, 2 for my battle tactic, and 1 each for the other objectives that I'm holding, like this one. I don't kill this character though, it's got 1 wound left. So in this situation, if I go next, if I get first crack at round 2, I'm going to be able to kill this thing, I'm going to be able to charge the Tree Lord, I'm going to be able to charge Brod into something. If I don't go second, I'm going to have to eat the attack of the Kurnoths with the scythes again, and then they can go and hide again. So let's see. And it's the Sylvaneth who get the first crack at round 2. So, damage being dished out here to the Warstomper, who does have Mystic Shield on him from the last turn. You can see the little goblin there under his foot that's being trampled. By the way, if you're watching this live, don't forget to comment along, by the way, if there's anything that takes your interest. Don't forget to like the video, of course. And obviously all the links in the description if you think this kind of red hot, spicy, succulent, tender, moist, finger-licking, good, dishlicious analysis of all my games is worthwhile and you want to see more of it. Why not pledge all your life savings to the Patreon? Or PayPal or whatever. It's all linked down there. Give me your life savings, basically, so I can afford to attend all these tournaments. That's the gist of what I'm getting at here. So, some wounds dished out. Shooting. I have Finest Hour on the Warstomper as well, because he's obviously a target this turn. Taking lots of wounds. He's only got 2 wounds left at this point. Now, if he was killed by shooting, that would be a bad time for me, because that means that the Kurnoths and the Tree Lord can both charge the Gatebreaker, but he's survived the shooting by the skin of his big... Well, I suppose he does have teeth, but they're in his belly. And these guys have teleported over here just to stay alive, so King Brod can't massacre them. So, they're ready to charge, and they go in, they kill off the Warstomper, finish him off, but they can't finish off the Gatebreaker. They've got up to 19 wounds, but he's still alive, so he's still hanging in there, and then they teleport away, because that's how they roll. Now, I believe there was no point me trying to suplex the Tree Lord over here, because it could still strike first, they could still strike first, and then teleport away. I could then use this guy to try and hit the Tree Lord, except that wouldn't help me too much because I wouldn't kill him probably in one go, and then he would hit me, and yeah, I decided not to attempt suplexing the Tree Lord. If it's on my turn, it's better to do that and to do the Beast Grapple as well. Those are really good on my turn. On the enemy turn, not as good, especially when they can strike first and teleport away. So they've gone. This guy's out of combat. So in my turn, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try and kill the Tree Lord. And how am I going to do it? Now that I'm on 19 wounds, I'm going to try and use my 4+ chance of 4d6 mortal wounds, because he has a good armor save. So, only 2 points scored there for the enemy, so not a big round, because they haven't kicked me off the objectives. And they're nowhere near my home objective, which is still being held by my 3 Mega-Gargants. So, in my turn 2, what's that? A dead Tree Lord. So, yeah, look at that. Very spicy. My Gatebreaker stays alive, does his one-off, replace all his attacks with a 4+ chance of doing 4d6 mortal wounds, and he kills the Tree Lord, which is great. King Brod goes into these guys, who are the Revenant Seekers, and kills 2 of them, so there's just 1 alive. So the fact one of them is still alive means that they can attempt to rally in the next turn, and I think they rally on 5 up for some reason. And you can see here I've spread out my Mini-Gargants around this so that no one can teleport and then easily charge onto it and kill multiples of them. Because even if you get onto it, I've got 20 models worth of points on there now, so it's very difficult to shift them. So they're just guarding my home objective. I'm just trying to win it on playing the scenario rather than trying to murder everybody. So that's at the end of round 2. I've got a nice healthy lead built up. If I can get the double now, it would be great, because I could try and finish off some units. I could get the Gatebreaker in there and try and kill the enemy terrain. The enemy go next. The Kurnoths will just have a go at King Brod probably, and then they could probably shoot down the Gatebreaker. So it would be very bad for me, but at least I've got some points on the board already. Next round. And what's that? Is that the sound of the Sons of BEHEMAT getting the next crack at this round? Is it? Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. So I go for gaining momentum and want to kill the last Revenant Seeker. You can see King Brod's actually accomplished that. And you'll notice that one of my mini-Gargants has left his post. So the Gatebreaker, his moment to shine, charged in onto the bow-wielding Kurnoths. For his monstrous rampage, destroyed the Wildwood, which then did damage to all the nearby units. King Brod was then able to stomp on the last Revenant Seeker and kill that, and then pile into the Kurnoths and do some damage to them. So yeah, that went very well. So the bow Kurnoths are all dead. And my mini-Gargants have spread out a bit because... Let's see if I've actually got a shot of him. Don't think I have, but the one that abandoned his post has gone this way. I want to try and take... or make sure I've got someone who can go after the middle objective in a minute. So it's looking quite good. Another 6 points on the board. If I didn't get that turn, it would be looking very different right now, but as it is, I've got a good lead built up here. The Kurnoths are very potent though, and obviously there's still teleporting shenanigans that can take place. So in the enemy turn, goes for gaining momentum, wants to kill my Gatebreaker, which is very doable. It's not got many wounds left on him, just 2 wounds left in fact. And the Tree Revenants start teleporting onto the objectives that I've now abandoned, so I'm going to have to send Brod back over here to take the enemy home objective shortly. He's alive, and the Gatebreaker is dead finally, so he did a good job, absorbed lots of damage, and did some cool things as well. Killed the Tree Lord, and killed the Kurnoth Archers. What are they called, the ones with the bows? What's their actual name? Let's see. Kurnoth Hunters with Kurnoth Great Bows, there you go. So killed them and then got killed after destroying the Wildwood, which is obviously hilarious. So my opponent still scoring but still behind. Next round also probably quite important to get priority here as well, because I need to get back on that point and start scoring again. So I do get the first go at round 4, which is good. So after combat, these guys teleported down here to this Wildwood, by the way, to get away from Brod. And on my turn, I tried to do Smash to Rubble to smash this piece of faction terrain in order to get my battle tactic, because I'm running out of things I can realistically accomplish battle tactics wise now. 3 is usually my limit, so I'm taking the 2/3 chance to destroy this piece of terrain with a monstrous rampage. And this guy is going for the centre. This guy's also going for the centre because I want them to try and take the middle objective. But King Brod makes his way onto this one. I don't make any of my charges in this round, so there's not any combat, but I am scoring points again. I'm going to score for this one and this one, but I don't get my battle tactic, so it's just 3 points. I need to get onto this one, really, because the enemy are currently on it and scoring, so I want to get my Gargants on there, who are, of course, worth 10. So, enemy turn 4, and they claw back with a big scoring round. Desecrate my lands, it's just auto-complete because they can teleport without a dice roll. And they're holding the centre. The Hunters would like to go and kill this mini, perhaps, and these ones teleport to safety. The Kurnoths actually end up not killing anybody. They're just kind of hanging out on this objective. If they abandon it to go and try and kill something, that means I can just take it off them. And they currently have, I believe, a Galatian champion on here, so they're getting the bonus point. Is that the case, actually? Yes, because there we go, 4 points. So they did get the bonus for the Galatian champion. So, eating back into my lead slightly in that round, but I still have a lead. So round 5, who's going to go first here? If I go first, I can definitely score with King Brod again. I can score quite big. If I don't go first, then King Brod might get killed, and I might not get a chance to score that top objective again. So, let's see. My opponent actually goes first and picks an objective. It's not Desecrate their lands again, that card is just still there. I think it's one of the Sylvaneth tactics. I can't remember which one it is, but it's one that they're able to accomplish. But they do not manage to kill King Brod. So you can see how many wounds he's on. He's on 38 out of 40. So how many wounds was he on at the end of last turn? He's taken 4 more wounds. So they wanted to magic King Brod to death. Because they don't want to abandon this objective, because as soon as they do, I move Mini-Gargants on and just take it off them. But at the moment, they've got a decent chunk of points or units on there. So King Brod lives. And the fact that he lives means I'm going to score up there now on my turn 5. And yeah, I'm going to score a load of points. King Brod still happy hanging out on here. The Kurnoths. So, the last couple of turns, rather than actually playing them out properly, because there's not much left and there's only limited things we can do, we were just talking through, working out what our best options were for scoring, so pictures are a bit weird and out of order because we're kind of changing our minds on things we're going to do, and just talking out what the best options are for the highest scoring potential. So the Kurnoths kill one of the Mini-Gargants, rather than camping there or trying to finish off King Brod or anything like that. Because they want to hold this objective. So if my mini gets on there, that's not enough to take it off them anymore. Except it is now that this model, the Arch Revenant, moves away to get the Grand Strategy. But that means I can get my Grand Strategy with King Brod being alive, and this mini can go on here and claim it because he's worth more than 4 Kurnoths. So my opponent gets the Grand Strategy in exchange for giving me my Grand Strategy, basically. Because if that one stayed here, that would deny me my Grand Strategy, most likely, but it would also mean that my opponent can't score, take what's theirs. Because there's only the 2 annoying teleporter units that are in my territory at the moment, so he needs 3 in there, because I've got 2 Mini-Gargants that can get in there on the last turn. So I can just get him here, get my Grand Strategy, so we both score our Grand Strategies, and I score big for holding the enemy home objective for most of the game. I never gave up my home objective once, kept it well defended. So, end of the game. I'll keep going because that was the first draft of our final points, where we actually end up scoring our... There we go. So my opponent had an attempt to score more points here because the Kurnoths, if they'd rallied a model, they would have had enough points on here to prevent the Mini-Gargant taking it off them. But they didn't manage to rally one of them. So that means that the Mini is able to get on here and get my Grand Strategy. So, there we go. And that means it's going to be a win for me. And had I been unable to get my Grand Strategy, because a Revenant had been rallied back to life, not a Revenant, a Kurnoth Hunter, that would have meant that it finished 22-21 to me. And at this event, you have to win by 2 points for it to be an actual full win. So that technically would have been a draw if one of them had been rallied back to life. However, as it was, but they weren't rallied back to life, so I was able to win by a score of 25-21. So very big scoring game. Clearly the win was down to me being able to score big on the enemy home objective for the whole game and never once give up my own home objective, because battle tactics were never going to do it for me because all mine are too difficult. There are too few that I can realistically achieve. You can see I got them early on and then just couldn't get any in the last couple of turns, whereas my opponent started off slow in round 2 there and was then able to score a bit more later on and catch up a bit. But overall, just King Brod holding down this one for pretty much the whole game, and my minis protecting the home objective, so the enemy never got a chance to get near it. Because even if you teleport over there and kill one of them, there's still 2 dipping their toe in that you can't kill, so you're not taking it off them. So they didn't even bother trying, because it was too much of a deterrent having those 3 Mini-Gargants there. Had it been 1 Mega, that would be more tempting to go after it, because you could bring your Kurnoths down over there somewhere. You could maybe bring them down from a bit of Wildwood. I think this hut counted as Wildwood. Then charge the Mega, you might kill it, you teleport away to safety. If you don't kill it, next turn you try again, you might kill it, and then you're taking my home objective. But you can only do that to 1 Mini-Gargant. You can't kill all 3 of them with that strategy when they're so spread out. So keeping them, those 3 minis back home, really worked out for me, even though they didn't contribute that much to the game outside of that. It did end up keeping me with the win. So, I'll have a look at the final standings. So, according to this app, I don't know if this is fully accurate for the scoring system that was used, but I believe it is. So, with 2 wins and 3 losses out of 14 players, according to this, I'm 11th, which is right at the bottom of all the players that had 2 wins and 3 losses. Which is okay. I can live with that. And winning 2 games at the end of the day there, that was nice. Yeah, so the strength of my army came through on day 2, especially in the previous game. The survivability against those Stormcast, and then the ability to whomp them to death was very fun. And in this game, this was a really fun, close game. And just being able to score early on, and then being able to just keep the points ticking over even when I didn't have battle tactics available, just keep scoring the main objectives throughout the game. It was just about able to get me the win in the end. Very close though. Very tough. It's a difficult matchup in some ways, because obviously this really powerful unit that can just hit and run is what you don't want to face as Gargants, because you want something to hit you and then be standing there so you can punch them back in the face really hard. So you don't want to get shot, you don't want to get fought and then teleported away from. Those are the 2 things you don't want as a Gargant. If someone's going to hit you, you want them to come right up to you and do it so you can whomp them back again with your club. And for the Sylvaneth, it's kind of difficult in that you need massive damage output before they get to your little nest, really, I would say. And they do have the potential for the big damage output, but you have to actually roll probably slightly above average if you're going to murder Gargants really quickly. And then when I had a little bit of luck to keep my... let's see, let's wind back a bit, because there was a point at which the Gatebreaker was near death but survived, which meant that the... hold on, no, it was the Warstomper actually, I think. Yeah, so the Warstomper was here and got killed, but he didn't get killed by the shooting, which meant the Tree Lord and the Kurnoths couldn't double charge the Gatebreaker, which kept him alive, and he was the one that was able to get into the nest and start doing serious damage and killing units left and right, which then also allowed King Brod to come in and deal with some stuff over here as well. Because if I hadn't been able to get to the Kurnoth archers, they're going to be a bit of a nightmare, because if I'm standing off on holding objectives in the last few turns, they're just going to shoot me to death, combined with the hit and run from the hunters with the scythes. So you need a little bit of luck with the priority rolls as well. You've got to have some of that in this game, which obviously I greatly lacked in particular game 3. I don't think I won any of them, and just winning one of them would have been a really big swing in the game. So all in all, satisfied with that. Got to show off my cool tentacle and eyeball army to the world, to the masses, and I never tire of telling people about the hours of toil that went into sculpting and painting all those eyeballs and all those tentacles. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun building the giants. That's the most important thing. I think building them might be the most fun part. Just going through the bits box, getting all the gribbly bits, making them look as disgusting and weird as possible, putting green stuff faces on their kneecaps and on their shoulders, and then whenever there's a join to cover, normally people think, oh, that's just going to be annoying trying to blend it in with the existing textures. For me, it says, actually, just put something weird and creepy over the join. You won't see the join, and it's an opportunity to do another creepy thing on the model. Just because it's so few models, you can spend a lot of time on the building and painting, and I've found that very enjoyable. I used to be intimidated by painting large models, and they would sit on my shelf for a very long time before I actually got to work on them. But once I got 2 Gargants done, the third one I actually found really quick, because I was so motivated and I knew I was so close to having a full army of Mega-Gargants then. And then the small ones were much quicker, because there's much less of a canvas to work with on them. So, like, less eyeballs that you can cram on for a start. And I did my best, obviously, to put as much weirdness as possible, but they're still much, much faster to do. So, very satisfied with that tournament, satisfied with getting my cool army out there into the world, winning some games. The next tournament is another Age of Sigmar one at the same place in a couple of weeks, and after that there is my Dead Zone tournament, which is in the heart of Nottingham. So if anyone's listening to this and is a Dead Zone player, then you should check out my Dead Zone tournament. You should be able to find a link to it in in my Facebook group, which is linked in the description. If you can't find it, just message me or leave a comment or something and I'll point you towards it. But it's a Dead Zone tournament called Code Orange, which I'm running in a few weeks' time. I've got lots of prizes and trophies and all sorts for that ready. And then after that, there's another Age of Sigmar event, which is a more friendly mixed doubles, where you take 1,000 points and then you have a different partner in every game. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And just check my calendar, because I think there's a lot of Age of Sigmar coming up in the next few weeks, actually. It's mostly Age of Sigmar, in fact. My next 3 tournaments I'm playing in a row are all Age of Sigmar, between now and the start of July. And then there are 3 Kings of War tournaments after that, which may well all be back-to-back as well. And then a mixture of Sigmar and Kings of War towards the end of the year. So I may fill in some of the gaps in the calendar as time goes on, hopefully. But in general, it's one in 2 weeks. I'm running one the week after, or 2 weeks after that, I think. I know, 1 week after that. And then the week after that, there's another one. Then 2 weeks later, another. Then another 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, there's another one. And then 2 weeks after that, there's a tournament. And then there's a bit of a gap. So there's not much of a gap between the upcoming events. So it's pretty thick and fast. There's going to be non-stop red hot spicy, sizzling, tingling, finger-licking good, dishlicious, moist content flowing into your Battle Report taste buds on this channel over the next few weeks and months. So stay tuned. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my army, my tactics or lack thereof at times, my opponent's armies. Let me know if you agree with me on any of the rules that I think are complete nonsense and shouldn't be in the game. And yeah, your general thoughts are more than welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that shenanigans, all the social media, or follow me on Twitter, join my Facebook group, Discord server and all that madness. And other than that, I believe that is everything. Unless I can think of anything else I want to tell you right now. Yeah, for anyone who missed I gave a little update on Rem earlier. He is currently on tour with his band, but he will be back in a couple of weeks, I think. So we're going to try and get a game in before the event that he's signed up to, and then we're going to try and get some shows in as well. The Andy and Rem show coming back. There's plenty to talk about, of course. We haven't done one for a while because he's been away a lot. So all that remains to be said at this point, I think, unless I've forgotten anything, in which case it's too late. All that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.